Hey guys, welcome back to episode 7 of TACoS Tuesday. There's a lot that's been going on, a few shakeups in the Amazon world, and I thought, especially with fulfillment stuff coming in, that we should bring our fulfillment master, our founder and CMO, Blair Forrest. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Is this how you guys start all the podcasts now? You guys have outpaced me, so I feel like I'm coming into your guys' realm now here. How were the other episodes?
It's been fun. We've been pretty much trying to get everybody who's the master of their specific topic. We've gotten a lot of smart people, and I feel like it's crazy how many people have reached out to me and Philip saying like, "Oh, I learned this from you. This is great." So on and so forth.
People actually messaging you guys now too.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Kind of famous.
And tell everyone about what happened at the event when we were in Toronto too.
So we had an Amazon event, and we were prospecting like we always do, and somebody told Blair that they knew me and they remembered me from the podcast. And I didn't think that was actually the case. I thought he was like buttering me up to keep doing these episodes. But he actually did. And it goes to show like how much work that me and Philip have been doing, and good things are starting to show from it. So we're really happy. We're happy we got to episode 7. We're hoping to get at least past episode 10 because that's when most podcasts stop. So episode 11 and on is when we will know we're the real deal.
What was your favorite episode so far?
Probably the Stephen Pope episode, just because
my Amazon guy kicking ass.
It's advertising is my zone, and we really dug deep into it and the changes and the strategies actually to get into it.
Very cool. That's amazing. All right, let's jump into it. Where can I help out? Where can I give my feedback and insight?
Okay, so regarding fulfillment, Amazon is going to be raising seller fees for the holidays to help them with inflation. Obviously, you're probably seeing that on your end as you have a warehouse that we're currently right beside. I understand from the advertising's perspective how to approach things, because we felt a similar issue during the IPI phase of early peak COVID. But from the fulfillment side, what do sellers need to do in order to survive this inflation and increasing fees are going to cut into their margins?
So there's a couple of things to consider. And so for context for anyone listening who didn't know, back in January, there was another round of adjustments based on all fees. And then recently they just announced another round. And assuming next January, they're going to be doing this kind of in like a perpetual motion where it seems like every 6 months, but it might be every year. And there's a few reasons for it. And obviously sellers are incredibly frustrated, but we also need to put our heads in the minds of the beast himself. Amazon heavily overinvested in real estate and infrastructure because of everything with COVID. Yeah. And obviously they had the most phenomenal year, just like how every seller that's listening to this had a very great year, and everything's pulled back. Yeah. So Amazon's almost going back onto their back foot, even though they're still performing incredible. They're trying to figure out the best way to optimize. Mm-hmm. They had a lot different issue than a year ago where there wasn't enough space in the warehouse. Now they're leasing out extra space because they have too much of it. Wow. And it's a short-term issue, but this is where we come to kind of this cause and effect where, of course, now there's going to be seller fee adjustments because Amazon's grown. They've quadrupled their infrastructure investment, and I'm pretty sure now they have the biggest warehousing infrastructure in North America. So they have the most warehouses and from a total square footage. So they've invested in it, and of course the sellers were going to pay a premium for it. And if anything, FBA's just got more advanced, more technical, and the hyper performance. Like we're going to be paying for a premium, and I do feel that we've almost been spoiled for a while, as much as everyone likes to complain about it, because if you haven't done FBM or you haven't done Shopify or tried to fulfill these orders yourself, you don't get to really see the full value of it. Yep. But I promise you, if you got to fulfill orders like how I did for 3 years in a basement, it makes you really appreciate FBA. And even with the small fees of 35 cents or 80 cents in adjustments, on a grander scale, when these brands are huge, it makes a big change. But for the micro brands and the micro sellers, let's say they're doing anywhere from 6 figures, like 100,000 to 5 to 10 million, the changes are still going to be minute. So there's some major fees that end up getting adjusted. Some of the ones were like the small and light program. Yeah. So the overall weight end up going up. So for anyone who knows about the small and light program, this is to optimize items that might be priced under that $14.99 or a certain weight range. So like the overall referral fees are cheaper. So they actually open that up. So there's actual positive there. But for categories overall, outside of apparel, those all had slight increases in their total FBA fees. It's nominal, is around like 35 to 50 cents for most categories. So it's a lot. And for a brand that is priced, let's say, under $19.99, it's not an easy pill to swallow. But for companies that, like I mentioned, Javon, like doing under a few $1,000,000, the total costs are in the thousands, not the tens of millions of dollars, like some of the aggregators or the packables of the world. So it's not that I'm putting like I don't want it to sound like I'm almost pulling back and saying like it's not a big deal, but in the grander scheme of things from a macro, it's going to happen. Us as sellers, we don't have choices. It's Amazon. We signed up for the beast. We're playing in the beast court. They have home court advantage at the end of the day, right? So
sure.
It's just some of my thoughts. There were some definite changes that we need to be considerate of and be cognizant of. But on a grander scheme of things, the fees will continue. Don't be surprised in January when it happens again, but it's just prepare for it.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing I'd mention there on my little bit of a rant and tangent is that, yes, the FBA fees have been going up, but on average, from a retail pricing standpoint, average trends across the board, you guys may have already spoken about this, but going up anywhere from like 10 to 20+%. So as the fees go up, the overall competitive nature, like they're all going in a delta, right? So it's not that your overall costs are increasing, but then your pricing is not staying the same. Like inflation's allowed for every brand to be a little bit more strategic with their pricing. So items that were priced at $19.99, they're now priced at $22. So as much as we like to look at it, there is a delta going up too to hopefully absorb those. And all your competitors are doing it too, because the nature of the shipping world, everything is becoming more and more expensive.
Yeah. That really was a tangent.
It's like I woke up ready for this.
So regarding in terms of actual strategy, does that mean sellers should, if these fees are actually cutting into your margin, should they be cutting out some of their product line? Should they be drip feeding into FBA? What are the certain things that a seller needs to do to maximize their margins now?
Yeah, so let's look at Q4, because I think we're approaching this, so I think it's a really critical time. So there's two facets of it. One is the overall fee changes, and then two is going to be their inventory limits and what they get a post from. I was just speaking to like one of the top 100 Amazon sellers in the US, and they just got randomly striked with a huge new limit out of nowhere, even though where things seem to be kind of looking up.
Yeah.
So on the FBA fee side, let's cover that side first. Really what it comes down to is if you know your costs, like you can't argue with Amazon. Yeah. So my two recommendations is, one, can we optimize packaging? So if there was an adjustment based off of a size requirement, are you able to now be applicable for small and light? Can you get yourself into a different subcategory that's a little bit more effective, right? If you can be a little bit strategic. It's a bit of a gray area, but so rechange packaging. Can you change up categories? And if not, you're going to just have to be strategic with your pricing. So those are my three recommendations. And I wish there was there's a secret sauce to open up a case and try to get through. You can kick and scream all you want, but it's happening. Yeah. Amazon's not going to change. And as much pull I have versus as much pull you have, like there's no echo that's going to go heard. Yeah. So I think on the FBA adjustment side for fees, there's not too much to do except let's get a bit more creative with our pricing strategy. Can we optimize the placements inside of Amazon? Yeah. And it might come down to looking at some options like how you mentioned, like merchant fulfillment. Yeah. But again, I think that's more of a secondary precaution where it's an adjustment in fees. Yeah. It's going to happen. And you'll probably notice like our 3PL versus all other warehouses. It's not that Amazon's just doing this. Like Walmart fulfillment program, their fees went up. Every 3PL you work with, their fees went up. Yeah. Like the overall cost of everything is getting more expensive. So our warehousing cost has gone up. Like we're feeling that too. So regardless, everyone's kind of moving in a perpetual motion to increase things. So I'd like to know your thoughts, but it just, if you know your cost down to a T, and whether you use a platform, whether you use an agency, like you got it now more than ever. Like if you're going to have to cut costs and it's a tough time for sellers, like if you don't know the numbers like the back of your hand, every fee that could happen, if those aren't locked in and you're dreaming about those, like you're going to be in trouble the next like 18 to 24 months. It's going to be very, very difficult. Yeah. What do you think?
On the advertising side, I wouldn't say it's peak COVID 2020 where we need to cut your advertising. Yeah. I would use a twofold approach. It's probably not the best time to launch a new product if you don't have the margin for it. The idea of making sure that although the fees are increasing, you want to make sure inventory moves as quick as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I would actually allocate my funds into my best sellers and trying to push them as much as possible. If you're noticing over the 6 month stretch while you're building a product that this isn't moving a lot and these fees are actually going to cut into my margin of a slow moving product, that's probably where you probably take stuff out of FBA and then move that to an FBM product, so that when you're starting to generate sales, you're getting reviews, and you feel more confident that that's going to sell faster, you can put that back into FBA. But it's a twofold approach to ensuring that I'm making sure that my stuff is moving faster so we can generate sales. Our margins isn't cut a lot by increasing fees. And also with our newer or slower moving products, we have a strategy that our fees, our actual margin is a little bit better if we can find a viable FBM service like AMZ Prep.
You got to plug them. You got to plug them. But let's jump into that, because I think it's super valuable. Like, and because like we're going on to the topic of inventory restrictions, which there was a little bit of a period there where everyone seemed like it was hopeful right after COVID, where expansions opened up, limits were going there. Now we're starting to see these, and like for the brands that I'm speaking with and the private brands you're speaking, they're now starting to re-implement these, and we need to be proactive of them. So I have a couple suggestions, and then please chime in, kind of like what you mentioned with the FBM. So when we think about the inventory restrictions, Q4 is going to happen, and there's going to be something. It does. Sure. I prepare for it now. Whether you think it will happen or not happen, like you will get punched in the face with your inventory. It's just, it's the nature of the game itself. You're playing the game. It's going to happen. There's going to be a foul. So some of the things, and I have a couple here that I'll mention and then chime in, is Trevon, you banged on it, like the ability to make sure that you can optimize your turnover. So like by doing smaller shipments. So Amazon has everything off of an IPI score. So this is basically your credit score on Amazon. The IPI score has a couple key indicators. One of those three is your inventory turnover, which literally just means like how much product you have inside of Amazon versus how quickly it's turning over. And it's a division of each other. So that ability to make sure that you optimize the total turnover that's happening inside of Amazon, in simple terms, it means like don't place really bad products inside of Amazon. Like remove your low hanging SKUs, or you're gonna have to figure out a way, like Trevon, you mentioned, like how do we scale up advertising to make sure that you can really tap into that market? The other two things I was going to mention was that, so let's optimize inventory turnover. And that could mean, do we go more aggressive with ads? Do we pull out low performing SKUs and have those via merchant fulfillment? That's another option. It could be doing smaller shipments to Amazon. So instead of having 90 days of stock, do we have 30? Right? It's you got to walk a very thin line, because if you go out of stock, you're in a lot of trouble. Or if your agency is running ads and they're not aware of how much stock you have, and you start a big Q4 push, or you have a lightning coupon, but you don't have 90 days worth of stock, you have 30. Like these are things that you need to have a cognizant thought process behind. But how do we optimize turnover? So that was the polling, the new sales. But then the other part of your inventory strategy is about like reducing your overall storage, because Amazon is just going to look at you from what you have in the warehouse versus how you perform. So if you have a lot of bench warmers and you have a lot of old products that's sitting there, our rule of thumb is anything after 30 to 60 days right now, I would just remove from Amazon. It's just my recommendation. The actual technical mark is 90 days. So if it's more than 90 days and you look inside of your Seller Central and there's any product there, that needs to go. That's not going to fly with Amazon. And also any inactive listings. Yes, I know your agency or your marketing manager said that they can somehow fix that listing. Not for Q4. Get the stock out, pull the returns on all that. So everything should be so tight knit going into Q4 that just look at it as like the most prime real estate, right? Like you wouldn't build a shack on the nicest property, especially during Christmas time, right? Like if you're inside the most busy shopping mall on planet Earth, right? You're probably just going to bring out your best movers. If you have, let's just say you have a room this big that it's right during Christmas, like you're not going to put your water bottle that was blue that sold 12. No, you're going to put in your chocolates that sell. You're going to put in your Christmas items and your ornaments. Like it just have that strategic thinking that, like you might lose a couple sales from those low performing SKUs. My personal humble suggestion is get them out of Amazon. like especially if you are severing with any level of inventory limits, like just do everything into power, because it will end up becoming an 80-20 rule. And as long as your top performers continue to outpace, every seller is looking at an acquisition or an end goal. And if you lose those top priority sales because a random jellyfish plus toy was keeping up storage inside of the warehouse, like I'll be upset, Trevon will be upset. Just don't do it. So it's a couple of recommendations, but you just, at the end of the day, you got to lock it in. It's like I was speaking to the fellas at Ad Badger, right? And because I was just on their podcast, and I was emphasizing, like, it's almost like eating your broccoli. You know what I mean? I was like, no one likes doing this whole inventory thing. It sucks.
It's not sexy.
No, it's not sexy. It's not fun to talk about. There's no Facebook groups or guru classes about how to make sure that you really crush it, which is what we're trying to make it logistics sexy again. But at the end of the day, eat your damn broccoli. Yeah. Figure out inventory. You probably have a month before it gets really crazy.
I would say so, yeah.
And I think going into it, and I'd like to know your thoughts, is that even going into Q4, like it'll probably happen earlier. Like I noticed that we're seeing trends of like Q4 purchasing patterns like happening in like early October, versus a few years ago it was like mid-November was when the peak. Now like the peak's happening in October, which means the planning's happening in September, which means if you don't have stock in August, like it's over before it even started. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Sellers need to start planning from now. We have another Prime Day that's supposed to happen within October, so that those actual fees and discounts plus the increasing FBA fees are going to cut into your margin a lot.
Well, and why do you think they're doing it during October? Right? Like usually it's a November push or like the Black Friday pushes, but they're doing it in October for a very certain reason.
To get as much inventory out as possible.
Bingo.
So that makes a lot of sense. What I would look at is look at my actual turnover and for each SKU and see what can I actually allocate in terms of actual FBA storage fees before it starts eating into my margin. It doesn't make sense at all. I would probably get a lot more aggressive with my TACoS, because with rising fees, you can increase your turnover by 5 to 10% by increasing your TACoS by only 2%. With that nominal increase, you'll be able to increase your turnover a lot more and save on those FBA fees by simply just being a lot more aggressive and ensuring that 60-day window that these products actually stay within stock on Amazon, we're doing 45 now. And we're drip feeding. The fees are actually cheaper, even though my TACoS jumped from 25 to 27%. With these slow movers, like Blair said, take those out of FBA or apply a really aggressive coupon so you can sell things through if you don't want to actually eat the fee of pulling stuff out. Those are probably my two best recommendations in terms of maximizing your margins and pushing things from there.
So one thing I want to just mention on that, so we can close off the my whole fulfillment, my fulfillment rant, is that with Q4 upcoming, everyone that's listening, depending on, I really hope you're listening to this early enough, is that you're going to have a really small subset of time to plan things. So a couple of my key recommendations to take away is that, one, if you have a 3PL or you do it yourself, depending on what you do from a logistics standpoint, or a prep center, whatever you want to call them, just a partnered facility that can handle your Amazon products. One, see if they have the capacity for FBM. Doesn't mean you need to turn on FBM. And like you mentioned, like there's a lot of disadvantages from an advertising perspective by doing FBM. It's going to be a very hard achievement to be able to do. And you may not want to be as strategic on those ad campaigns, but they're probably slow movers. You probably realistically should be running ads. They're not moving fast as Amazon and FBA. Like there might be something wrong outside of my suggestion on inventory. So see if your 3PL can do FBM, because that's going to be a critical piece of it. Even if they're not activating it, have it set up. Because a lot of fulfillment centers like ours, for example, if you don't have FBM actually set up, which means products inside of picking bins, your product might be sitting on a pallet. It's not ready for FBM. And I promise you, it's peak Q4. They're not going to be going and breaking down a pallet to set up picking bins. Not during Christmas time.
Yeah.
For example, like in our warehouse, like we're setting up deadlines for when new clients can get onboarded. So if it's after November, we're waiting until January, just so you have an idea, right? So like, because of how gridiron it is, we don't change anything during that time. Everyone puts their head down and locks it in. So it means who's ever in the warehouse, like the gates close and we dial it in to make sure that every customer can get product by Christmas. So check out if you can have FBM set up. Make sure that your 3PL is fully competent. If not, find an alternative too. And maybe even have stock at your own house or your garage. just have a backup for a backup for a backup.
Yep.
Your 3PL is going to get hit hard. Amazon's going to get hit even harder. And if you want all the control in the world, if you have a small prep center in Ohio or New Jersey that has 2 staff, you might be in trouble.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that it's not the right choice, but let's be cognizant of like the realities of what the landscape looks like right now.
Yep.
Like, plan for the unexpected, plan to get punched in the face. And if you're going into Q4 thinking everything's green and dandy, there might be something flawed that you need to start poking holes into. So it's just my suggestions to take away, but it's going to be a good one. Yeah, with their early second Prime Day, like sellers are going to smash it. They're going to have a really successful Q4.
It's never been a better time to really push aggressively with another Black Friday or another Prime Day, Black Friday, Christmas coming in, Boxing Day if you're Canadian like us. There's a real big opportunity to double your sales in a way that probably wasn't viable maybe a year or even 2 years ago with how hard COVID hit everybody. Advertising is probably the best gateway in actually getting there. Be as aggressive as possible, but also know your numbers. So if you are able to know that you can emit 2 to 3% in margin, but you're going to increase your turnover by 30%, it will even out based on the additional fees that Amazon would be causing you if you are using a more conservative approach.
Eat your broccoli.
Basically, that's the story of today. You want to do the Packable thing?
Yeah, let's do it quickly.
Okay.
Let me just give you context on it.
Okay.
Packable is they're like a top 10 Amazon seller. At one point for a while, they were the number 1, number 2. On average, they're probably doing around 500 million on Amazon, just in GMV. They've been around, I think it was 2011 or 2013. Like when I got started in the Amazon space, they were the Patterns or the Spreetails of the world. So they're always a top performer. They don't have private label brands. They're a straight wholesaler. But they just did it at mass scale at a very early stage before Amazon FBA was even available, before wholesale and Amazon FBA, like all the things that you guys hear about now. It was much earlier than that. Mm-hmm. They quickly became the fastest, and for the past 6 to 7 years, they've been the most dominant ones in the space from a wholesale perspective. Where some of the other brands like the Spreetails of the world focus on brand players, they're focusing on wholesale distribution play. So as of I think it was 2 weeks ago, they announced bankruptcy, which means they laid off or laying off actively all employees inside of the company, and they are also liquidating all stock. This shocked literally the entire Amazon landscape because they're a top performer. They do on average $1.7 million in revenue per day on Amazon. Just let those numbers sink in, right?
Yeah.
Like they're crazy figures. And I think there's a couple key learnings that you can have taken from it, and let me know your thoughts, but it's know your numbers. Like for the fact that a big company like that, I think one, it's the ability to know your numbers. Like even the biggest and bad boys are having issues. So your several $1 million business can have the same holes getting poked in it. I think that's a huge learning curve. I think 2, Amazon landscape is changing. If the number 2 went down, I think the next 12 to 18 months, we'll see who can actually ride the wave versus who was inflated off of a raised capital or money that was injected because they couldn't raise another round. That was the whole issue where no one was giving them new financing and they were already heavily in debt. Didn't have another choice. Yeah. So I think those 2 are super key. And I think the third will just be like prepare for the unexpected. Like if it can happen to them, I think it can happen to anyone. Yep. But it shocked the world that a company that big can just go under. And they're liquidating everything. And we just thought they were crushing it. Yeah. So it's really interesting to see.
Yeah. It's really crazy, especially I would say what we're experiencing now on Amazon is a bit like market correction, whereas in early 2020, anyone that was able to stay in stock doubled, tripled whatever they were doing just simply because everyone was looking for Amazon as a viable way to get anything into their house. Right. Whereas now there's a bit more options. Inflation has hit everybody, pending recession. So there's a bit of market correction. And even the big boys, like you said, are having these issues. So understanding what you actually can do, that it's viable from advertising perspective, an inventory perspective, what's your current IPI score is going to ensure that you don't run into the same mistakes.
Yeah. I think we end up seeing next 18 months, I think we'll end up seeing a lot of these guys go down. Yep. You're seeing it with a lot of these aggregators. And obviously, like we work closely with a lot of these guys. Yep. So we're seeing it from the ground floor. So I think the aggregators that didn't have strong operators, I think that will be a huge issue. And any top 100, top 1,000 that just didn't have strong operators behind it, and they raised capital and they didn't able to fall through, it gets a very sensitive topic, but something's going to have to change. And you'll see this pull back. Like evaluations are going down. Aggregators are buying not as big business. Like they're buying only premium size, like 10 million plus, ones that have really stable securings. Because I think everyone was super excited about it, but then they forgot about some of the fundamentals when you bring 200 new businesses into one system, right? And it was okay because the market was going up, but now that we're on a falling knife, it's about how do we make sure that we clean up costs. So it's a good realization. I think it puts everyone into a bit of a corner. And for the packable employees, like God bless them, that's terrifying. But for the overall market itself, I think it's a good correction because it needed to happen. And I think people need to see these big players start to get hit to see like what's actually happening at the top, because it looks like a lot of sunshine and rainbows. No, actually, they were burning millions and millions and millions on a weekly basis. So there's a story to be told here, and there's a lesson to be learned. But it all comes down to the fundamentals: strong operators, know your margins, and maybe don't raise that much money, even though it sounds like a pretty sexy idea to me. So just my thoughts. But if anyone from Packable is looking for jobs, I made a whole Google sheet. So we have like probably 400, 500 people and like 200 to 300 employers that we're looking. So we'll definitely add it there or have a look at any of our postings, and we have it there too. So hopefully you can find yourself a new home.
Awesome. Wow. So that was a lot. Thank you, Blair, for joining.
Absolutely. I'm jumping to a meeting.
Awesome. So that is episode 7 of TACoS Tuesday. Thank you again, Blair, for joining, and we will see you next week.